I'm happy to welcome Miranda Devine to the program. She's a columnist for the New York Post and host of Podforce One, the podcast, which you can subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts. She also has a new piece out in the Post right now. It's a big one. FBI, Secret Service butchered the Thomas Crooks case and invited conspiracies. We deserve the truth. Be sure to check this one out. I want you to tweet out a link. Miranda, thanks so much for coming on the program and talking about this with us.
Pleasure, Stu. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. This is a big story. And, it's interesting because we all went through this. We all witnessed what happened with Thomas Crooks shooting President Trump and, coming within inches of ending his life in front of the entire country. It obviously affected everybody very deeply. And then the story sort of just went away. Like, usually there's an obsession about social media posts and what is the background of someone who would attempt to do something like that. We didn't really have that with Thomas Crooks because we were told there really wasn't anything there, right?
Yes, and look, I've kind of, since this source came to me with this information, I've kind of searched myself about why did I not look at this earlier? Why did none of us, we all dropped the ball? And when you think back to Butler, I mean, Donald Trump comes within, a fraction of an inch of being shot in the head. And then 2 days later, he's in the RNC. Or I think it was a day later. And so we're all covering then that. And then Joe Biden dropping out. And then Kamala Harris. And it's the whole election campaign. And then afterwards, I guess, there was just this feeling that, oh, well, the FBI's in good hands now because Donald Trump's back in. And so that evidence, such as it is, will be forthcoming. But what we find out from Senator Ron Johnson, who his job is to do oversight of the FBI, is that his requests for information for, camera footage and forensics and autopsy results and other documents about the Thomas Crooks and about the assassination attempt have been just totally blockaded. He says stonewalled by the FBI. Even since Kash Patel took over, to the point where Ron Johnson had to subpoena Kash Patel in July on the 12th-month anniversary of Butler. So, it's just very unfortunate. And I think the reason that my source has done this on his own, investigated this information and brought it forward is precisely because there hasn't been any transparency from the FBI on an enormous story that I know that the president is still not satisfied about.
I can't imagine he would be. It's fascinating. And you have a list in here of all the different social media accounts that they wound up finding, your source wound up identifying. And like some of them you could see maybe might get missed somehow. I mean, I think chess.com was one of them where he had some messages. But it was also YouTube, right? Like these are majors. That's about as big of a social media as you can get. And these were not guised, veiled attempts at, threatening people and politicians. These were really overt. How is this just getting to us now?
That's right. I mean, Thomas Crooks, my source found, I think, 17 different online platforms that Thomas Crooks had accounts with. And as you said, they're mainstream. I mean, it's YouTube, it's Google Play, etc. Obviously the FBI must have had that immediately afterwards. Google and YouTube were shutting down these accounts the day after Butler. So they would have done that on the instigation of the FBI. And Thomas Crooks was using his own name. My source got to these accounts through Thomas Crooks's phone number, one of his phone numbers that was made public, and an email address. And he managed to trace everything to the accounts that Thomas Crooks had set up using his name on every platform other than PayPal, when he used the name Rod Swanson, which happens to be the name of a former FBI agent who I spoke to, who is in Vegas, had left the FBI and was working as the head of the state of Nevada's criminal investigations at the time of the Las Vegas shootings, mass shooting. That's an equally mystery by someone who equally was a ghost on social media, we were told, on online platforms, we were told, had no friends, acted alone, big mystery as to motive. The difference between him and Thomas Crooks is that the Las Vegas shooter was in his 60s. Thomas Crooks was 20. But Rod Swanson, the former FBI agent, was gobsmacked when I told him that his name was on the PayPal account that Thomas Crooks had used. Rod Swanson, former FBI agent, told me he doesn't have a PayPal account, doesn't even know how to set up a PayPal account, has never talked or had anything to do with Thomas Crooks. But he did tell me that it is inconceivable, given what I told him about the violent rhetoric being espoused by Thomas Crooks online, it's inconceivable that the FBI would not have had him on their radar. So he's a very senior, experienced guy. So look, there's also a Ron Swanson character in Parks and Recreation. The source initially thought that might be who Thomas Crooks was referencing. We don't know, but I think he's a highly intelligent. We know from his school reports, Crooks was highly intelligent, and he was very precise. So could have been Ron Swanson, but I thought Rod Swanson was more likely. And I did contact that former FBI agent, and he said no, he had nothing to do with him.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense for someone who's, obsessed with this type of violence to maybe know that name, even though it's not super publicly available. Let me go to the disconnect here with the FBI a little bit, because it is interesting. Right after this, some of this reporting sort of came out, and people were making accusations. Well, the FBI said there was no online footprint. The FBI made a strong statement saying, no, we never said there was no online footprint. And I mean, that might be technically true from an official, statement standpoint. But there were statements, and you highlight some of them from Christopher Wray, who kind of made it seem like really there was nothing there. Why do we think there's a disconnect, and why do we think that disconnect is continuing into the Trump administration?
Well, I mean, I don't know, but what evidence there is of this kind of secrecy is, as you say, Christopher Wray, then the FBI director, a week after Butler testified to Congress, and he said, using careful language, that we've searched our database and there's no mention of Thomas Crooks before Butler. Now, I know from the investigation, the Biden research that I did, that there were numerous derogatory information that came to the FBI about Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and that influence peddling operation that the family was conducting around the world, making millions of dollars. That derogatory information that came in warning the FBI even before Joe Biden ran for office as president, that came in and was hidden away in a secret sort of locked file away from the average FBI agent accessing. So just because you search the FBI database, as Christopher Wray told us, does not mean that this information doesn't exist in a separate part. So my ears pricked up with that. And then a week later, Wray's deputy director, Paul Abate, testified to Congress, and he lied by omission. He misled Congress because he gave us only the first part of Thomas Crooks' trajectory to becoming an assassin. The first part where he was very pro-Trump, sort of anti-Semitic, sort of far-right rhetoric. And then something happened to him in January 2020, and he flipped 180 degrees, and he became very anti-Trump, culminating in some very violent rhetoric in August of 2020 about assassinating political figures and military figures. And then he goes dark. My source said he just doesn't exist. He just goes dormant on all his platforms until Butler, and then he's shot dead.
I mean, that is very, very strange in and above what we know now about him. And that's not normal behavior for someone his age in particular. But you do highlight he was violent against seemingly everybody. I mean, he was threatening left-wing people and right-wing people all over the place in his name. And you just think they'd have to be aware of this guy. And perhaps they were.
But it's important, Stu, just to note that, yes, but that was sort of what you just said was sort of what Abate was trying to imply, but it's not technically true because he flips. So he hates Ilhan Omar and the Democrats, in December of 2019, but in January of 2020, he hates Donald Trump and Donald Trump's supporters who are sheep and cult, and Donald Trump's racist and etc. So something happened to him in those 2 months that he flipped. So it wasn't just a general, I hate all politicians. It's I hate the left, and then suddenly I hate the right.
Yeah, yes, I didn't mean to mislead on that one. Yeah, you're totally right on that. And it certainly, with the extension of a few years of darkness and we see where he wound up, it's pretty clear he stayed on that same path, or at least we think he did. Before you go, we've only got a couple minutes, but I wanted to get into your, you had an interview with J.D. Vance. J.D.'s a fascinating figure who, I think people first knew from his book and the success of his movie. He comes in and does a great job through the campaign. I think blows people away, in the debate. What were your impressions of him, and where do you think he is right now?
Look, it was the first time I'd spent any length of time with him. I had met him a couple of times before, but he was very open, really frank in a way that a lot of politicians aren't, but that Donald Trump is, and great sense of humor, very self-deprecating, absolutely adores his family, interested in his children and who they are and their little different personalities, loves his dog. I met his dog, beautiful German Shepherd, and we just had a bit of a laugh because, it's not that funny, but Joe Biden also had 2 German Shepherds, but unlike J.D. Vance, he had no control over them. The dogs were sadly attacking Secret Service agents, drawing blood, ripping their clothes and so on, and ended up having eventually to be sent away, but only after many months of these attacks. And so I sort of asked if the Secret Service guys had PTSD when they saw the German Shepherd from the Vance family come in, and he laughed and said, yeah, well, a few of them did say that they were really happy that my dog is so well behaved, and he's trained it to, it is so well behaved, beautiful dog.
Well, I know we got to get you out the door, but we only got about 30 seconds left. But last one for me. Outside of any relationship with the president of the United States, is the Rubio-J.D. Vance relationship maybe the most important in our government right now?
Yes, I think so. Certainly, Donald Trump has said behind closed doors and more recently openly that he thinks that a J.D. Vance Rubio ticket would be unbeatable. And J.D. told me that his best friend in the government is Marco Rubio. I've seen them interact together. Very easy, humorous relationship. They share a great sense of humor. There doesn't say, I asked him, is there rivalry? Rubio's obviously, I think, 10 years older than him. Wouldn't Rubio want to be the first on the ticket? And he just laughed and said, look, we haven't even talked about that. I don't want to start thinking about that. We're too busy, as he would say. But I don't detect at the moment any rivalry between them. And I think J.D. Vance would be number 1 on the ticket, certainly. That's what Donald Trump said.
Fascinating. Miranda Devine, New York Post columnist and host of Pod Force One. She's also broken a ton of huge stories over the years, and really important to make sure you're reading her stuff and listening to the podcast. Be sure to check out her new piece over at the Post. Has all the quotes, by the way, from the social media we've been talking about. FBI, Secret Service butchered the Thomas Crooks case and invited conspiracies. We deserve the truth. That's the name of it. We'll make sure to get it up on Twitter as well. Miranda, thanks so much for all the work you do, and I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.